Just when I think Warhammer Plus is getting its act together, it slips up again. This week we were told we were getting a masterclass, and as of time of filming, it hasn't materialised yet. It's been a constant theme of Warhammer Plus for poor communication, and that trend continues here. We were only told about masterclass not being available in a Warhammer Vault article, and it was hidden away in a paragraph in that. So if you weren't thinking to look for that, you wouldn't know about it at all. It is going to come later, but I assume that means next Wednesday and not sometime during the week. The last time that happened, where something was pushed to the next week, it was a battle report, and it was to flesh out next week's release because there was only going to be one programme released, so it was to kind of stretch the content out again. And I'm assuming that's what's going to happen here. I assume there was no problem at all, and it's just going to pad out next week. It's not the end of the world, but I was actually looking forward to this masterclass because it's all about weathering. I'm working on Imperial Guard tanks at the moment. Well, I've got my own techniques. I wanted to see how Games Workshop did it and add that to my toolkit. I'd love to make a case for Warhammer Plus, but Games Workshop are not making that easy. There hasn't been a battle report for 2 weeks, and that's a real shame. I find that with the sporadic release schedule, the engagement is dropping for each show. You can't really get into anything. So I think that is something that definitely needs to improve. I've said this just about every week though, and it hasn't yet, but it definitely needs to improve. They could do better in that front 100%. Lucky for us this week, the rest of the releases are pretty good, if extremely short, because they clock in at less than 45 minutes for everything. Warhammer Vault is its usual consistent self. We've got 4 White Dwarfs and 1 Warzone Damocles book, and it is the Mont-Ka book, which focuses on Tau, Admech and Imperial Guard. There's lots of nice diagrams about Imperial Guard battle companies and things like that, but the thing that really took my attention was the tank markings, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on Imperial Guard tanks, so there was a lot of inspiration there. I find that's what these books and White Dwarfs have been really good for. You can go back and look at your leisure and pick things up like heraldry and tank markings and stuff like that, so that's a really good thing. It's a lot easier than digging through your paper collection. For the White Dwarfs, it was a relaunch of White Dwarf as a monthly magazine because it had gone to weekly for a time. I actually didn't mind the weekly releases. I thought they were pretty good. There was constant stuff rather than just have to wait a month for one White Dwarf. I know that they couldn't really get anything of substance done in a week, so I think that's why it went back to monthly. And these ones do not disappoint. These ones, we've got, I think, Warcry. We've got the re-release of Blood Bowl, which was the first release in a long time because it was the edition before this edition. We've got the release of Genestealer Cults, and we've got the Battle of Prospero release. So that is one hell of a 4-monthly period. Loremasters seems a lot better when it's regular. This week it was Mortarion, and it's the 3rd Loremasters in a row, and it's really beginning to show because it's becoming one of my favourite shows. It also answered a big question I had, and that's why the Demon Princes, the Demon Primarchs, don't just rampage throughout the universe and basically win the war because they're so powerful. And that's because it takes a heck of a lot to keep them on the mortal plane, so they can only do limited engagements. So that answered that question. The artwork as usual is fantastic, and I'm really beginning to enjoy it for what it is. I know it's not quite what I want with more in-depth lore, like some better lore channels to be honest, but with the regular release it's something that I can really get into. I think that's what's missing from the whole thing, is just the consistency of knowing that a show is going to be released. I've said this just about every week, but I stand by it. I just want one of each show every week. That's all I want. Then I'll be happy. What can I say about Angels of Death? It was incredible. I'd said after 2 slow weeks it was building up to something, and boy was it. This episode was amazing. If you're a Blood Angels fan, this is absolute heaven for you. Well, it's absolute heaven for me because I am a Blood Angels fan. I've already watched it a few times. I'm going to watch it again tonight. There's just so much happening throughout it, all over the place, so it'll take a good few watches before I take everything in. I'm going to talk pretty in depth about this episode because I really enjoyed it. It'll have some broad spoilers in it, so if you haven't watched it yet and you're going to, then probably best to switch off here. If you're not bothered about seeing spoilers, then watch on. First of all, we've got the Dreadnought. Other than having a few cheesy lines, he was amazing. He was fast, he was agile, he was deadly. The only other time I've seen a Dreadnought on screen is probably the Dawn of War games, and they kind of stomp about like this. Shoot someone, stomp about a bit more, shoot someone else, stomp about a bit more. But with this guy, he was practically running. He's turning all over the place, shooting one, flaming the other, grabbing one, squidging him with his claw. It was amazing to see. I really loved it. Next up was the gun line of Blood Angels as they tried to get the door open. I just loved this. They were standing brothers shoulder to shoulder, taking down wave after wave of Gene Stealers. This was just, it's everything I want from 40k. Next, they're through the door. The hope of opening the doors was immediately dashed by seeing the altar empty. I mean, they didn't know the altar was empty. They didn't know anything was there in the first place, but we did. And it built a real amount of tension. The combat that ensued was pretty much how I expected it to go as well. I'm going to have to throw a little negative in here, and that is the Magos. She was bad. She didn't have any menace or anything about her. She was just a bad character. I did wonder what would happen if a Gene Stealer fell a long way. And I was thinking, will they land on their feet? Will they just run away? Will they die? And I did not have long to find out. That was brutal. The depiction of the Black Rage was excellent. It went a long way to explaining why it's so difficult to snap out of it. It made Mephiston seem a lot stronger because he has snapped out of it in the past. It made the Death Company seem a lot scarier because 5 of those guys charging at you would be absolutely terrifying because they're absolute nutters. I never thought that with Terminators, Chaplains, Captains, etc. It would end up being a Tech Marine that was my favourite character. But Hadriel was my favourite in this whole thing, or he is so far. There's still an episode to go. I loved his lines. I loved his matter-of-fact way of going about things. It's made sure that I will be getting a Tech Marine to add to my Stormlord's army because I just love them now. I never did before, but I do now. This felt like a season-ending episode, but there's still one to go, so there's plenty of time for a twist and to tie up loose ends. I'll be really sad when Angels of Death finishes, and I don't know how they're going to follow it at all. But fingers crossed it's just as good. All in all, this episode was satisfactory. Thanks for joining me for another week. Let me know what you thought about Angels of Death and Loremasters. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers. Just when I think Warhammer Plus is... Surprised myself there. Oh, that's terrible. For the White Dwarfs, it was back to monthly... For the White Dwarfs, it was back to monthly... For the White Dwarfs, it was...